That comes at an enormous cost.
It is worth it, said the head of the Air Force today.
I'll tell you this, it's worth every penny if we save one American life.
Even in purely dollar terms, says the Defense Department. For example, hitting 16 targets could have taken 32 bombers, 16 escort jets, a few ground defense suppressor planes, and 15 tankers to refuel them all. The same 16 targets could be taken out by just one B-2. That's 75 aircraft, nearly 150 people, and $7.5 billion worth of planes versus just one B-2 with 2 pilots aboard. Tony Minetti, Brooklyn, New York, is ready for the next mission.
Between penetration, its long range, it's carrying 16 2,000-pound bombs in a stealth aircraft, you know, you combine all 4 of those assets together and you got yourself quite a package.
A package ready for more action if called upon in the NATO mission. I'm Jeff Locke, CNN at Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri.
Cruise missile. The answer. The average price for one Tomahawk cruise missile is about $700,000. Now, back to strike against you.
Planes flying the air cover over this base, and the aircraft that did violate the Bosnian airspace were not shot down, but they were intercepted. The early warning radar system did find them here.
Our early warning system picked up 2 helicopters heading in from the east, approaching the Bosnian airspace, and immediately we took defensive measures in accordance with our force protection.
Did they cross into Bosnian airspace?
Our indications are they crossed. I'm not sure right now exactly how far into Bosnian airspace, but we're checking that right now.
It is only the second time that these air raid sirens have been put into action outside of a drill. That was last night when the 2 MiG-29s were shot down, and then again this morning when the 2 helicopters violated the airspace. But they are on a heightened sense of alert here. Everyone has on their full battle gear, and the shelters are ready in case it comes again.
Gold, is it?
Sorry. Just announcement, please. There's no need for a stampede on the material. We have got handouts for all of you after the briefing at the press service.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Howard. Commodore, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry that we had a technical difficulty to start off with. No, I don't do that. I'm not going to move from here. And I'm sorry that we still have a small screen for you. I am promised that by Monday we will have a large screen and the production will be perfect so that from even the back you'll be able to see everything that we have to show you. But what I can offer you today is those handouts which I hope will be slightly more helpful than yesterday, and I know that there are some media productions of the video clips which are also available. What you see on the board now is an indication of where our targets were struck last night. And as I briefed before, in the region of Belgrade, Niš, and targets in Kosovo. Okay? This was a pictorial representation of the air-to-air engagement which occurred. Once again, I seem to be apologizing all the time, but those transport aircraft are, of course, the latest swept-wing fighter aircraft. Our 2 aircraft in blue were on their standard combat air patrol over the MND North sector in S4, and they were advised of 2 hostile contacts which were operating out to the east. Yes, please. They turned as part of their normal cap, and as they turned to a westerly direction, the hostiles turned towards them, threatening them and violating Bosnian airspace. At that stage, the aircraft did, as I said before, conducted a standard countermeasure, turned in towards their targets and to put out a copybook interception and launch their missiles, shooting down both the aircraft. Some stills of the some of the targets that we've attacked over the last couple of days. This is the, as you can see, Yakovo SAM site before destruction, and you will have to look carefully to notice the where the destruction is. And let's have a look at the other one, please. And you'll see a large black hole where the low-blow radar associated with that system was. Thank you. Next one. You've heard this and you've seen this come up quite regularly over the last couple of days. Machinika airfield before, and yes, please. The aircraft taken out afterwards. Thank you. We should now have some film from the aircraft.
Yeah, these clips will be available to you afterwards.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that gives you an idea of the technology that goes in. And whilst I must apologize for the problems that we had to start off with, to get that sort of technology, that sort of battle damage assessment as quickly as we can, and in the form that it is, for you all to see, is a monumental piece of progress. I can assure you that it takes the highest technology to be able to bring that sort of information into this audience in the time that it's taken. If we went back 2 years, 3 years, you would never see that sort of information come up in that sort of form, which is really very user-friendly. I'm sorry if you're sitting at the back and you can't quite see it, but afterwards, you're very welcome to come and have another look. You're very welcome to take away those clips, because it really is amazing technology.
Instructions to Allied air crews means that, as you say, these planes can fly in lower and slower.
We're very alarmed by the deteriorating situation in Kosovo, and we've always said that our objective in beginning this operation was to halt the violence in Kosovo and to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. And therefore, to do that, we need to be able to go against those forces in Kosovo, those units, those tanks, those heavy weapons, which are responsible for the shelling of villages and all the suffering we see. Let me say one thing: we're not going to target troops as such, but we're certainly going to go after the heavy weapons and the command posts and the headquarters which are used to sustain that violent campaign.
Now, since Jamie Shea spoke to us, NATO officials have clarified slightly what he had to say. They say that Allied air crews pilots will be able to go after troops in the field. The troops are on the target list. Yugoslav military and Serb police, if they are in the field, will be targeted by NATO air crews. They will only be safe if they are in barracks. Joey?
Patricia, there had been some talk yesterday, particularly about unity among NATO. Is this a decision that all of the NATO ambassadors made together to move forward into this new phase?
Well, yes, of course, Joey. There's no way that this could have gone ahead without the agreement of all 19 NATO member nations, including the 3 countries that joined only last week, almost under combat conditions: Hungary, Poland and the Czech Republic. There was a meeting of ambassadors earlier today at NATO headquarters. Those ambassadors then took a break to consult with capitals, and they came back and gave the go-ahead. Javier Solana, the NATO Secretary General, then made a telephone call just about an hour and a half ago to the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, US General Wesley Clark, who is commanding this operation, and authorized him to go further in the air campaign, to move into phase 2. Joey?
CNN's Patricia Kelly for us in Brussels at NATO headquarters. Thank you.
Dug in just down the road. They should have been inside Kosovo by now, policing an agreement for Serbs and Albanians, which means Christians and Muslims, to live side by side. Instead, they passed the time by entertaining the international media, whilst the people they were sent here to protect are being killed.
Yeah, it is frustrating. We've come here to do a job, which is to implement the peace deal. We can't do that at the moment, and so it is a bit frustrating, yes.
Just what the future holds for the NATO ground forces here is unclear. The politicians say that this force would never be used to aid the air campaign to try and bring the Serbs to heel. But they also say they'll do whatever's necessary to protect the Kosovo Albanians, and that might mean deploying ground forces.
Certainly, as this conflict enters its second week, its supporters' hopes of a quick end have come to naught. Keith Graves, Sky News, Petrovac, Macedonia.
A pair of Prowler jets form the vanguard of NATO's attack tonight from the Aviano air base in Italy. Electronic warfare is their speciality, armed with HARM missiles to lock onto Serbian air defense radars. At last light, they were followed by a wave of F-16 jets and F-117 stealth fighter bombers. So far, resistance from the ground has been largely limited to anti-aircraft fire. But with the campaign switching its aim to attack troop and tank concentrations in Kosovo, the risks for the NATO pilots are growing. The Serbs
Field in northeastern Bosnia. The MiG was one of two shot down by NATO jets on Friday as they entered Bosnian airspace. Earlier today, air raid sirens sounded at the stabilization force base in Tuzla in Bosnia-Herzegovina as a Yugoslav helicopter approached the Bosnian airspace. NATO says its planes tracked the copter, but the craft did not cross the border.
On yet another strike somewhere into Yugoslavia. We don't know where at this stage. This will be the third bombing raid by the B-52s, armed as they are with cruise missiles. But of course, since the policy has been changed into phase 2 by NATO tonight, whereby they will step up attacks against other targets south of the 44th parallel, that is in Kosovo itself and other areas in southern Yugoslavia, then clearly the targets perhaps will have changed. But this is just one of the planes we can barely see in the darkness there at the end of the runway, waiting to take off from RAF Fairfoot. Well, we have the
that we thought we would see, but we're not sure that that's just not a tactic that he may be using to husband his weaponry and then use it at a point when he thinks he can surprise us. But I can tell you that's not going to happen. I mean, every mission we go out on, we're ready for the worst, and we don't slack up at all in our defenses.
Aviano Air Base in Italy, the news emerged of a change of tactics. During this, the fourth wave of attacks, it won't just be fixed military installations that are sought out by the missiles, but mobile Serb tanks and forces too. The same forces who are being held responsible for atrocities like this, the burning of another Kosovo village. There are also reports of further massacres of ethnic Albanians.
When people look at what's happening to these people now and they see the appalling sights, they hear the tales of massacres, and people say, well, isn't this because NATO has committed itself to these airstrikes and is carrying out airstrikes? No, the reason why these massacres are going on is that Milosevic is simply continuing the program of harassment, repression, ethnic cleansing that he's been carrying out for months and for years.
This was another message for Milosevic, the wreckage of one of two Yugoslav MiG-29s shot down over Bosnian airspace by NATO aircraft. This flight recording captures just what happened during the attack.
Magic to same contact, bogey. Two friend hostile. Two's engaged. Fox 3. Slash 2 MiG-29, bullseye.
Air-to-air combat will be an increasing risk for the NATO pilots, and the new task of hitting Serb artillery in the field is likely to mean more involvement for the RAF Harriers based in Italy. Tonight, the Prime Minister pledged extra British air power for the strikes against Yugoslavia. As the US B-52s trundled off the runway at RAF Fairfoot in Gloucestershire, this, the fourth night of airstrikes, is starting to seem like just the beginning of a long campaign. Emma Hurd, Sky News.
It's when they're over the target that the pilots sense a difference.
When you release the bombs, it's still all dark. You move your aircraft to look out for surface-to-air missiles or AAA that may be coming up. And when the bombs went in, I was looking right down at the spot, and there was a huge explosion. It was an ammo storage facility that went up with a tremendous explosion with bits of red-hot something going thousands of feet up into the air. It was a very impressive sight, and at that moment, there's a degree of, yes, we've done it.
For now, the main concern.
Officials say those troops are meant only to police an eventual peace accord and won't be sent in to stop the fighting, even as the violence continues just across the border.
It is frustrating for the soldiers here. We have been given a task. We're not able to implement that task at the moment, so clearly it is frustrating.
Frustration while Kosovo continued to burn. Chris Burns, CNN, at the Yugoslav-Macedonian border.
Gunning directly for the approximately 10,000 Serbian troops and special police reportedly responsible for the looting, pillaging, and murder of ethnic Albanians in Kosovo.
We need to be able to go against those forces in Kosovo, those units, those tanks, those heavy weapons, which are responsible for the shelling of villages and all the suffering we see.
NATO aircraft will fly lower and slower in the more dangerous Phase 2 of its operation, intended to make Serbian forces pay what one senior U.S. official called a heavy price. One NATO military source says commanders believe 3 nights of airstrikes have damaged Yugoslav air defenses to a sufficient level, and that there will be minimal risk to NATO personnel. This despite the fact that bad weather hampered Friday's strikes. With their laser-guided bombs useless in heavy cloud cover, some NATO aircraft returned to base with their payloads intact. The weather is expected to be a factor again tonight, but satellite-guided weapons can operate in any weather conditions, and even before darkness fell Saturday, at least 2 cruise missiles had been fired from U.S. ships in the Adriatic. In light of the dire situation in Kosovo, there have been calls in some quarters for NATO to commit ground troops. Even the former Supreme Allied Commander says the option should be seriously considered.
I think it will send a very strong message to President Milosevic that we are indeed serious about not only an air campaign, but putting that together in a combined campaign plan with the ground force. And if we can do that, it may assist in getting us to perhaps a negotiated settlement.
But in top NATO and U.S. government circles, there clearly is no appetite for a high-risk ground offensive. Assistant Secretary of Defense.
And then on my radar, I had a target, and I wanted to hit it, and then I launched my rocket. In this moment, I felt blow from their rocket. They launched several rockets on me, and my plane turned into a torch.
Late breaking news from Yugoslavia reports that a NATO plane has been downed in Yugoslavia. The Pentagon, we should report, and NATO have both refused to confirm this report. However, we have on the telephone line from Belgrade CNN's Brent Sadler with the latest there. Brent.
Thanks, Joey. Serbian television broke into broadcasting a short time ago with pictures showing what was, as the F-117 is concerned, the Yugoslav authorities are saying it's a Nighthawk from the Holman Air Force Base, the 8th Fighter Squadron. Joey, that's the latest.
And I think we could defend ourselves very well against anything that he might do, but it certainly would make it a little more intense in the flying if he decided to start using some of his surface threats.
Has been rescued,
and
yes.
we will hear from Ken Bacon in about 15 minutes' time from the Pentagon.
That's absolutely correct.
All right,
we'll be here.
Okay, let us recap for our audience then. This F-117 that was shot down about 30 miles, or the wreckage that was spotted and identified by Serb television about 30 miles out of Belgrade. We've been talking about that, seeing that
over Yugoslavia this afternoon. I'm happy to report that the pilot has been rescued and is safe at an Allied base. He and the combat search and rescue team that picked him up are all safe. I do not now have a report on his condition. That's something that we will have later, but not tonight. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to be able to give you very much detail about this incident. We do not know, for instance, what caused this plane to crash. That's one of the things we'll learn as we interview the pilot and we talk to the people who flew a mission with him. But I can stress 3 points. The first is this operation will continue. Nothing that happened today over Yugoslavia has dampened our resolve to see this operation through to its military ends. Second, we will continue to expand the target set, as NATO Secretary General Solana said today, to focus more on the forces within Kosovo, both the Yugoslav Army forces and the Special Police Forces operating in Kosovo now. And third, I'd like to stress both the bravery of the pilot and the heroism of the team that rescued him this evening. They performed in a way that should make all Americans proud. And with that,
drilled into pilots until it's reflex. What happens the first few minutes after a pilot goes down in hostile territory goes a long way towards deciding his fate.
Upon getting on the ground, they try to get away from the aircraft, and then they look for hide sites, and basically, as the name would imply, escape and evade.
Now's the time to gather your thoughts, recall your training, your briefings, and your evasion plan of action, or EPA.
It's military training like this that helped Scott O'Grady evade capture for 6 days after being shot down over Bosnia in 1995.
Jumped into a quick hold-up point, and then must have been, just a couple of minutes to where I could hear where people were at the parachute, followed by just a few brief minutes after that, people were walking right by me.
Training, luck, and wits kept O'Grady alive, ingredients every NATO pilot in trouble will need. The Geneva Convention is designed to protect downed pilots, but the Pentagon is prepared for the worst.
We have significant assets pre-positioned in the theater for getting pilots back, and obviously our first effort would be along the lines of what we did to get Scott O'Grady back.
The effort's a sophisticated one. It begins in earnest once a pilot's been located and his position confirmed through a radio beacon all NATO pilots carry. That's when specially trained rescue teams are dispatched in assault helicopters like this CH-53 Super Stallion that went in to get O'Grady out.
They can fly in day or night. They fly very low to the ground. They have extended range on them. They carry extra fuel bags so they can go further.
For the Pentagon, the goal is a scene like this one, a pilot safe and surrounded by loved ones. For a pilot, the trick is never having to deal with this at all.
There's been a gun battle of a wider Balkan conflict, but history could even repeat itself. The First World War began in neighboring Bosnia-Herzegovina. World War II also